Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about amino acids, as Chris has said. Now, when I started to look into amino acids, I wanted to get some good books on it. So I saw in Chris's bookshelf a book called The Role of Nutrition in Health and Disease by W. Kornatzer. So I thought, well, that's great. I'll start with that one. And Chris is normally a very generous man, but I did see a slightly different side to him when I asked to borrow his favourite biochemistry book. But eventually he agreed for me to borrow it, and I promised to guard it with my life. So I got some good stuff out of that. We went on a long-haul flight to Los Angeles to do a seminar, and I thought, I'll take this book with me. Great opportunity to catch up on my amino acid knowledge. And Chris was fine about that, but during the flight, he got a bit nervous as he saw my gin and tonic hovering over the pages of his precious book. But it was fine, so I didn't spill a drop, so it's all intact and pristine. And also I want to thank Anne. She's gone now, but Anne Mamouk. I went to visit her because she's a platinum practitioner. And we go and visit platinum practitioners and we take along samples so that they've got samples to use with. We check they've got the right test vials and things and just chat about the products. And I was telling her about the amino acids and that we had a new range of amino acids. They're pure amino acids, nothing else in them, because we found that if they're mixed with anything, say a magnesium stearate, they just don't work in the body. So really you need the pure substance. And I was telling her this and she said, oh, actually, I've got a great book on amino acids. And she pointed me towards this book. And really, it was very good. It's called The Healing Nutrients Within, and it's by Eric Braverman, and I've used that quite extensively. So what was I looking for in these books and all the numerous websites I've been looking at? Well, I wanted to find out what exactly each amino acid did for the patient, because we find that the patient, as you've seen with Jerome, strengthens to only one amino acid. Now, I wanted to know as a practitioner what that amino acid was doing for the person, how it was going to affect their health. And also, I wanted to be able to tell my patient, because patients say, well, if I take this, then what's it going to do for me? So I just wanted a sort of summary of each one, not in any great biochemical detail, but just a summary of what each one can do. Now, we know in general that amino acids, they make up the building blocks of proteins, and there are about 50,000 proteins in the body. We know that they all repair, they're good for tissue repair, good for growth. They're involved in the immune system, and they can be used in the Krebs cycle for energy production. But they all do that in general, so I wanted to know specifically what each one did. So I've looked at them in groups, really, just to group them together. So the first group I'm going to look at are the sulfur-containing amino acids. And this is methionine, which is the essential amino acid. And this breaks down to cysteine, the non-essential, and taurine. So if we look at methionine, well, these are all sulfur-containing amino acids, so they have a sulfur molecule in them, which is why they're so good for detoxification. And the sulfur combines with the hydrogen molecule to become really very powerful antioxidants. So we look at methionine. Now, the two functions of methionine are methylation and detoxification. Now, this is the methylation chart. Now, if you've been doing this work for quite a few years, you've probably come to know and love this chart. But if you've only seen it for the first time, please don't be alarmed. I'm only going to talk about the one section of it, starting from methionine at the top. So methionine converts, you can see following the red line, converts to S-adenosyl methionine. Now that is what we call the universal methyl donor. So S-adenosyl methionine gives its methyl group to other compounds in the body. And then we go further round to SAH, S-adenosyl homocysteine, and then round to homocysteine. Now, we've talked a lot before about the dangers of homocysteine in the cardiovascular system. So if your patient has high levels of homocysteine, you need to make sure that they're going to be breaking it down that route, or they're going to recycle it back to methionine. So if we go down from homocysteine, we go to cystathione and then to cysteine, which is a non-essential amino acid, and that is a great detoxifier. And if you see being converted from cysteine, the glutathione, which Chris has been talking about, because that is the major scavenger in the body of free radicals. So glutathione is made up of cysteine glutamic acid, and glycine. And the other way from cysteine, we get NAC, N-acetylcysteine, N-acetylcysteine, NAC. And this is a great detoxifier as well, and we do it as a product, and it's a really great product to carry in your handbag. Whenever I go away, I take it with me because it detoxifies any chemicals that you may come across in the food or in the air. It's just great to take with you. And it's also great for children when they're hyped up on aspartame foods, so it's always good to carry it around with you. So from cysteine, which is an non-essential amino acid, we go down to cysteine sulfite, and then hypertaurine, and then taurine, which is another non-essential amino acid. So I'll be talking about those two as well. So this is a diagram showing methylation. Now you can see in the middle there, that's the methyl group, so that comes from S-adenosyl methionine. And the purple is the DNA. Now DNA is coiled around a protein called a histone, that's in the blue there. DNA is coiled around this histone, and histone has a loose end or a tail to which compounds can attach. So this is where the methyl group attaches. And when the methyl group attaches to this gene, it tightens the coiling of the DNA around the histone. So this is what will repress that gene, because there's certain genes we want to keep repressed, particularly things like here, you see the health endpoints here, particularly genes that may lead on to the degenerative diseases like cancer, autoimmune disease, mental disorders, and diabetes. So it's the methyl groups which repress those genes and stop them from being activated. So we need plenty of methyl groups so that we can protect ourselves against these genes that we don't want to be expressed. So this is really to explain the diagram. Methylation is about regulating our genes, and it represses or activates the genes. So this is DNA being coiled around the proteins called histones, and each histone has this loose end which the methyl group attaches onto. So it says here, as long as the DNA remains tightly coiled, then you've got no chance of exposing that gene and getting it expressed. So adding a methyl group switches the gene off, and if you don't have a methyl group on it, then this gene will be activated. So we need lots of methyl groups to keep our genes in check, really. So if we maintain the integrity of our DNA, then we're going to avoid the aging diseases, cancer, other degenerative diseases. So the methyl groups decide which genes are expressed. Now, as I said earlier, methionine has two functions, methylation and detoxification. So if you're in a very toxic environment, say the air is polluted, or you're a lot of toxic metals, or the diet has got lots of chemicals in, then you're going to need a lot more detoxification. So you're going to be using up your sources of methionine in detoxification. So you won't have much left to make the methyl groups. So then you've got more chance of your genes, the bad genes, being activated if you're in a more toxic situation, unless you take a lot more methionine. So a sort of light-hearted example to illustrate this is my daughter. She's recently had a new job, and she now goes to every social function, Wimbledon, Queen's, Isle of Wight, sailing, everything. So she came to me a couple of weeks ago and said, no, just recently, and said, you know, I'm feeling really tired, can I have a treatment? So, I mean, it's tough on a poor girl, she's got to go to all these social events. So I said I would treat her. And previously she had shown to methionine, and she had shown to 2 capsules of methionine. So I treated her this time after all her socialising, and she showed to 3 capsules of methionine. So all the sort of diet that she'd been having, all the cocktails she'd had to drink, you know, it was just too much for her, and it pushed her detoxification up a lot, so she needed more methionine, because she wouldn't have been having enough to detoxify and then enough to make the methyl groups to keep her genes under control. So you can imagine really in a more serious situation, if you lived in a very toxic environment, you would need a lot of methionine to make sure you detoxified and you kept your genes in check. So these are some functions that methylation is involved in. We've got the conversion of phosphatidylethanolamine to phosphatidylcholine. And in the dementia seminar, we learnt how important phosphatidylcholine is for the brain. It's the phospholipids in the nervous system, particularly centred in the brain. And this makes our cell membranes very flexible and permeable so that all the brain chemicals can get in and out very easily. So that's really important in the brain. It's used in the conversion of noradrenaline to adrenaline, which is obviously useful in stressful situations. And it breaks down dopamine, noradrenaline, serotonin, those neurotransmitters, and it also breaks down the estrogens and testosterone. And that's really important, as we've seen earlier with the demonstration with the 380 acetate, that some of these metabolites of estrogens can be very carcinogenic. So you need enough methyl groups from methionine to break down your estrogen so that you haven't got any carcinogenic substances in your body. It's used in the manufacture of DNA, as we saw in the diagram. It's also used to make creatine, which is the energy for the muscles, and carnitine, which is what Chris talked about with the carnitine shuffle, which is shuffling all your fatty acids, your triglycerides, into the Krebs cycle so that they can get burnt. And the product that we use for that is, as Chris mentioned earlier, the carnitine and alpha-lipoic acid. And that's really good, actually, to get people's fat burning. I've given it to a couple of people, and they're starting to lose a bit of weight, so they're really thrilled. It's used in making of the histones as part of the DNA, and it's also used in making myelin for the myelin sheath of the nervous system. Now, methionine converts to the non-essential cysteine, which is the great detoxifier in the body, and we've seen how it goes on to make glutathione. Now, cysteine is a very highly reactive substance, and in the body it rapidly converts to the more stable cysteine. Because when I first looked in the Master Nutrition Kit, there's cysteine and cysteine, which confused me. I thought, is this a spelling mistake? But they're very closely related, and we tend to test with the cysteine, which is the EIN. The cysteine is two molecules of cysteine joined together with a very strong disulfite bond, which is a double bond, which makes it a very stable molecule. So at the end of these molecules, we've got something called thiol groups, which are really the sulfur molecules at the end of the molecule, which is what goes on to detoxify and then eliminate all the toxins out of the body. So cysteine also plays an active part in the making of fatty acids. If you remember from the dementia seminar, we talked about DHA being very important for the brain. And DHA is a carbon chain length of 22. It's docosahexaenoic acid, and docosa in Greek means 22. So it's 22 carbons, but it's made from alpha-linolenic acid, which is 18. So the body has to add on 2 carbon atoms at a time to get from 18 to 22. And cysteine is involved in this process. It's also involved in the skin, the hair, and the nails. So if you're short of methionine and not converting to cysteine, then your skin, your hair, and your nails will suffer. So then from cysteine, you saw that methionine then converted on via cysteine to taurine. Now taurine, so to remember about taurine, just think about it as great for the heart. Now some people say taurine isn't really an essential amino acid. It's a byproduct of those 2 amino acids, but it doesn't contain a carboxyl group, which is what all the amino acids do contain. And it's not used in the building of the protein strings. So what biochemists call it, to be pedantic, is an amino sulfonic acid. But it's a really useful compound, and it's critical in preterm and newborn babies for their growth and development. Because newborn babies can't synthesize taurine themselves, so they need to rely on the breast milk from the mother. And taurine also helps the mother to make prolactin, which leads to the production and the release of the milk. So the main function, it's in the heart and it's also in the retina of the eye, and I'll go on to that a bit later. But the way taurine works is it allows the passage of the sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium ions in and out of the cell. So it electrically stabilizes the cell membrane. So in the brain, it's the most plentiful amino acid in the developing brain of the child, and it's second in the adult brain, the first one being glutamic acid. And it's mostly in the olfactory bulb, in the hippocampus and the pineal. And we know how important from this morning the hippocampus is for memory. It also acts as an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it has a sort of brake on processes in the body. And this gives it an anti-anxiety property, because it's sort of dampening down the anxiety. And it also, in that same role, it protects against too much excitation. So in the heart, which is the most important aspect of it really, it's the most abundant amino acid in the heart, and it's involved in the metabolism of calcium for the transmission of the nerve impulses. I talked about it electrically stabilizing the cell membrane. So this electrical stabilization is going to be depleted in cases of arrhythmia. So a lot of cases of arrhythmia are short of taurine because they haven't got the stabilization of the firing. So abnormal heartbeats and arrhythmia could be a sign of low taurine. And on the heart muscle, it promotes the pumping of the heart muscle, and it increases the force of the heart muscle contraction. So it's good for high blood pressure. It's an antagonist to the blood pressure increasing substance angiotensin. When taurine is low, renin from the kidney is activated, and then that activates angiotensin, which pushes the blood pressure right up. So again, you need the sort of braking aspect of taurine to break down that renin-angiotensin feedback loop. It also works on the gallbladder. It stimulates one of the bile salts, taurocholic acid, which breaks down fats in the small intestine. And it increases the elimination of cholesterol in the bile. So in that role as well, it lowers the build-up of plaque in the arteries. So the eye, taurine is very rich in the eye. In the retina of the eye, it can lead to, if there are low levels of taurine, it can lead to the disease retinitis pigmentosa, which is where people start to lose their peripheral vision. It also protects the eyes from toxins. It's also very rich in the choroid of the eye, and the choroid of the eye is the white of the eye. And if you've got enough taurine in the choroid of the eye, then it can make the pupil be misshapen, as in cases of astigmatism. And actually that's what I have, astigmatism, and I was short of methionine. My amino acid is methionine. So clearly I don't have enough methionine to convert to cysteine, to convert to taurine, to put enough in my eye to keep my eyeball the right shape. So the picture's all fitting together, really. In its role as electrically stabilizing the cell membrane, it helps in the prevention of epileptic seizures. So to go back to taurine, really to summarize taurine, it's good for the heart. It works on the gallbladder, so you'll probably find with people who are short of taurine, they've got heart problems, gallbladder problems, they may have eyesight problems, and they may have high levels of anxiety. So the next amino acid, arginine. Now the main function of arginine is in the urea cycle. Now the urea cycle functions to get rid of excess nitrogen and excess ammonia in the body. And the nitrogen is produced in the body from the breakdown of proteins. So the urea cycle needs to get rid of all the waste products of the breakdown of proteins. And it also eliminates ammonia. Now ammonia is produced during deamination, which is the removal of the nitrogen portion of the amino acid. It's also produced when we have intestinal parasites. They produce ammonia. And it's produced when we break down other amino acids and the DNA components, the DNA bases. So we need to get rid of that ammonia. And if you don't have enough arginine, then you're going to end up with high levels of ammonia. And ammonia is very damaging to the brain and to the kidney. So arginine is created from ammonia and carbon dioxide, and it then goes round the urea cycle to produce citrulline and then ornithine, and then back to arginine, so it's a sort of recycling process. So we see here at the top carbon dioxide and ammonia coming into the urea cycle, going on to make citrulline, going round to make arginine, and then ornithine, and then continuing like that. So it's a recycling process. Another great feature of arginine is it goes on to produce nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide helps to dilate and relax the blood vessels, so it's great for the cardiovascular system. So in that respect, it helps with high blood pressure, with clogged arteries, and with heart failure, coronary heart disease, all the cardiovascular diseases. And in its ability to dilate and relax the blood vessels, it's important in erectile dysfunction. We have a product, nitric oxide factors, which is also very good for people to take before sport because it opens up their blood vessels and gets them pumping, ready to do sport. So nitric oxide is also in the immune system. Arginine goes on to make nitric oxide, which then goes on to kill gram-positive bacteria, viruses and fungi, so it's got a really important function in that respect as well. And the great thing about arginine is it's the cholesterol fighter. So it regulates cholesterol. It lowers the blood cholesterol and inhibits fat absorption. So the higher the arginine to lysine ratio, the lower the cholesterol. Now lysine is high in meat proteins, and arginine is high in vegetable proteins. So this is really what we've always been told about eating more vegetables will help your cholesterol. Because the higher the arginine, so the higher the vegetable proteins to the meat proteins, then this will lower your cholesterol. So this is a mechanism how that works. So also arginine will make you lean and mean. It helps to reduce the body fat and increase lean muscle mass. And for this, it also forms the building blocks of creatine, which is the energy in the muscles. So now we have a group of glutamate amino acids. These include the excitatory neurotransmitters, of which glutamic acid is one and aspartic acid is the other. Glutamic acid, I've got so glutamate or glutamic acid is made from alpha-ketoglutarate in the Krebs cycle. And that goes on from glutamate to make glutamine, and then glutamine is a recycling process back to glutamate. And also all these amino acids work together, because in that conversion of glutamate to glutamine, there's help from asparagine and aspartate. So they're all closely linked together, these excitatory amino acids. And then we've got aspartate or aspartic acid made from oxaloacetic acid or oxaloacetate from the Krebs cycle. And that has a recycling function with asparagine. So aspartate goes to asparagine and vice versa. So if you're short in glutamic acid and glutamine, you've got problems with the brain. These two are connected to the brain function. It's an excitatory neurotransmitter, as I said, so it helps with mental performance and alertness. You need the excitation to get the alertness and the attentiveness. Now this won't be in your notes, unfortunately. This is sort of hot off the press stuff. It's from the Mercola website, and it's about the relationship and the function of glutamic acid and K2 together. So obviously K2 is in this fantastic unpasteurized butter. And what glutamic acid does, it transfers calcium to the bone from the blood. So it's going to be good for building up the calcium in the bones. And it helps to decalcify the arteries. So glutamic acid is imported into the walls of the artery, where it binds to calcium and removes it from the blood vessels. So then we need the K2 to come along from the butter and integrate that calcium into the bone. So they work closely together, glutamic acid and K2. So glutamine, the other made from glutamic acid, is a primary source of brain fuel. And it's also a mediator. You often find these amino acids, some of them mediate between the others. And glutamine mediates between the excitatory neurotransmitter and the inhibitory. So it keeps a balance in the central nervous system. And also glutamine has the advantage of having two nitrogen molecules, two nitrogen atoms, which is good for transporting nitrogen around the body. So in that respect, it has a role in DNA by contributing the nitrogen to make the purines and pyrimidines of the DNA. It also denotes nitrogen to make B3, niacin, and it participates in the breakdown of arginine. So it also has some detoxifying ability. It helps to clear ammonia from the tissues, especially the brain. I did mention that ammonia is very damaging to the brain, so you need plenty of glutamine to keep the ammonia away from the brain. And it's used in the metabolism of sugar and fats, and in that way it will provide energy for the brain. Now, on a different subject, it is used to treat intestinal permeability, which is what we were taught years ago in my training, that glutamine seals up a leaky gut. And I used to remember that because I thought, well, glutamine glues up the gut. And we've used it a lot for that. So proline. Proline is made from glutamic acid. And the great thing about proline is it makes collagen. Now, collagen is really important for the connective tissue, for the tendons, for the ligaments, and for maintaining joints. And I had a patient the other day, and she comes to me quite a lot. And I was treating her. I got to the amino acid part of the treatment, and it was getting quite late. And I thought, which amino acid is she going to have out of the 21? And as she was lying there, she started to talk about her knees, and she always mentions her knees. Sometimes they're better, and sometimes they're worse. So I thought, knees, connective tissue. I'll try proline. And luckily, that was the one she strengthened to. So if you've got problems like that, think proline, think collagen. And also it's good for the skin, because you need collagen in the skin. So this is great for making collagen and reducing the wrinkles and the process of aging. So if you want to stay young and beautiful, then make sure you have enough proline. It prevents arteriosclerosis as well. It enables the walls of the arteries to release the fatty buildup and put it back into the bloodstream. So it probably does this by its role in producing collagen. It's going to keep the arteries flexible. So the other two, aspartic acid and asparagine, these are two similar structures, and they're involved in energy. Energy is the big thing with these two. So asparagine combines with ammonia to form the aspartic acid, as we saw from the diagram, and that's a reversible reaction. And again, in this sort of balancing capacity, asparagine also maintains the balance between too much or too little stimulation in the central nervous system. So aspartic acid goes into the Krebs cycle, and it helps to activate the process by transporting energy into the mitochondria. This is going to give you lots of energy in the mitochondria. It's also very important in the urea cycle. It starts the whole process off by forming carbamyl phosphate. Aspartic acid also helps to move magnesium and potassium across the intestinal wall, which is going to help improve energy in the muscles. And we've learned in the past really how important magnesium is in energy, so we need also the aspartic acid to transport it across the intestinal lining. So given that it's such an energy-focused amino acid, deficiency can be a problem be an issue in chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, the next group of amino acids are the threonine group. So we've got threonine, the essential acid, going on to convert to glycine, serine, and alanine. Now, with threonine, think immunity. This boosts the immunity. It's been shown to promote the growth of the thymus, which is the main gland in the immune system. Now, some rats were supplemented with threonine, and this is a kind of nice experiment on rats because this showed that their thymus weight was increasing, and they also increased their levels of immunoglobulins, so the IgA, IgE, IgG, IgM. There's also a bit of an emotional aspect to it. It's been shown to protect against mental instability and irritability, so there's a mental component to this one. And it also helps with digestion and the absorption into the intestines, and it helps to metabolize fats, which quite a few amino acids do that. And it controls the fat buildup in the liver. So a lot of people do start to get a buildup of what we call fatty liver. And these amino acids are vital to break down those fats. There's also been some studies to say it's helpful in treating the central nervous system, as it's shown to help build up the myelin, so it's good for cases of multiple sclerosis. And actually Chris has found with a couple of his patients that they did with multiple sclerosis that they did show to threonine. So glycine, this is derived from serine and threonine, and this is another one for collagen. We called it the collagen helper here, because collagen is made up of 3 amino acids, glycine, proline, and lysine. And glycine is also a major inhibitory neurotransmitter as well, along with taurine and GABA. It has a detoxification function. It stimulates the production of glutathione, as we saw in the initial diagram. Glutathione is made of cysteine, glycine, and glutamic acid. It detoxifies benzoic acid, which is a food preserver, and goodness knows how many food preservers we are exposed to every day. And it reduces levels of uric acid, which is what is high in cases of gout. And Chris mentioned this morning as well that glycine produces heme, which is obviously really important. So serine, if serine, think memory, it goes on to make phosphatidylserine, which is abundant in the nerve cells and is active throughout the brain, particularly in the hippocampus, which we know is the memory center of the brain. So any memory problems or learning problems, look at serine because of its function in making phosphatidylserine, which is the phospholipids in the cell membrane which are in the brain. So alanine helps with low blood sugar, so it's a hypoglycemic helper. It can be converted quickly into usable glucose. So it's good for regulating blood sugar levels in hypoglycemia and diabetes. So it's largely concentrated in the muscles, and it's a form of energy that is released from the muscles as circulating energy in the body. It also has a role of transporting nitrogen from the muscles to the liver when you're doing aerobic exercise. So it stops you getting a build-up of these toxic substances during exercise. So branch-chain amino acids. Well, I did wonder why they were called branch-chain. I thought maybe there was some complex biochemical reason why they were called branch-chain amino acids. But when I looked it up, it's just the fact that the structure has branches coming out of the side. So biochemistry is simple sometimes. So we've got isoleucine, leucine, and valine that are all branch-chain amino acids. And with these amino acids, you need to think muscle. You need to think muscle building, increase in muscle. And this is what all the guys in the gym want to take, the branch-chain amino acids. And it protects muscles during stress. So if you're exercising, it's good to have a good supply of these branch-chain amino acids so you don't go twang with your muscles. And it does act as a fuel for muscle building. It repairs muscles and prevents them from being torn during exercise or during any activity, really. And it gives you more energy and increases your stamina and endurance. So it's great for sports people, but it's great for everybody, really. We do find a lot of people, as they get older, are deficient in these branch-chain amino acids, and that leads to muscle wasting, so what we call sarcopenia. So everybody needs a good supply, really, of branch-chain amino acids. And we do find that it's only one of them that shows. They have been sold as a combination for a long time, but in our testing, we find that people will only show to one of them. And if you put all 3 on together, they don't test properly. So, you just need the one that you're short in, basically. So this is what I was saying about the older person, the sort of wearing out syndrome, which can lead to losing muscle mass and also losing bone density. And they also have a capacity to help with pain relieving, which is good. They're consistent of the neuropeptides, which give a pain relieving effect. And these are the enkephalins, and there's high amounts of enkephalins in leucine. So leucine stimulates the insulin release. So in the muscles, insulin stimulates the making of protein and inhibits the protein from breaking down. So this is how leucine works to keep your muscles from breaking down. Now valine also is involved in the neurological side, so a deficiency can cause neurological defects in the brain. And also low isoleucine can give you muscle tremors, so this may be an indication that the person needs, if they've got tremors, that they may need isoleucine. And all of these branch-chain amino acids are decreased in liver disease, so in hepatitis or psoriasis, or even just the fatty liver syndrome, check to see if they're short in branch-chain amino acids. So lysine. Well, lysine has been known for a long time as the cold sore killer, the herpes simplex killer. But it has since been shown to have a much broader capacity for helping the immune system. What lysine does is increases the growth of the thymus, and it increases the thymus factors that are stimulated by lysine. So we've got the T cells are stimulated by lysine, so they attack target cells that have been attacked by viruses or tumours. It's helpful in the production of the B cells, which produce the antibodies. It also helps to produce the interleukins and the interferons, which are the signalling molecules in the immune system, which get the immune system started. So really important for the immune system. So lysine and arginine share a common transport system, so they're antagonistic. So if you're high in one of them, you'll be low in the other. It will force the other one down. So lysine has been found to be useful in stressful situations. And this is more psychological and mental stress than physical stress. Some studies were done at the United States Air Force School where they put pilots under stress by making them fly for 48 hours in a simulated aeroplane, but kept them going for 48 hours. And after that 48 hours, they tested their urine and found that the lysine levels were low. I'm presuming that they were allowed to urinate in that 48 hours, otherwise the stress would have been increased even more. But yeah, the lysine levels were low. And a similar study was done in New York in the Burke Rehabilitation Center for young people. And these young people were made to work for a duration of time. And this was only physical stress. And their lysine levels weren't affected at all. So lysine is sacrificed in stressful situations. And I can relate to this very well because, unfortunately, I do get cold sores from time to time. And this is when my lysine is low, clearly. And in stressful situations, I can almost feel the cold sore erupting on my lip. So also you have to keep your lysine and arginine level balanced. And what I tend to do in stressful situations, I will probably eat chocolate, which is high in arginine, so that's going to depress my lysine levels even more. So with the stress and with the eating of high arginine foods, my arginine goes like that and my lysine goes down and I get a cold sore. So that's basically saying that you need to increase the lysine foods and reduce the high arginine foods. So I've got to keep off the beer, the peanuts and the chocolate. So lysine is also the collagen builder. It's the third amino acid that builds collagen. And it's also helpful in osteoporosis. Studies suggest that lysine with arginine, they're working together in this instance because you need a good balance of both, make bone building cells more active and enhances the production of collagen in the bone. And also to help with osteoporosis, lysine helps the body absorb calcium rather than eliminating it in the urine. Then on a slightly different note, it produces carnitine, which I talked about before with the carnitine shuffling the fatty acids into the Krebs cycle to be burnt. So in that capacity, it helps lower cholesterol as well. So histidine. Now histidine is great for arthritis, which really surprised me because normally you think histidine and you think, oh, converts to histamine, high levels of histamine, you've got watery eyes, runny nose, itchy skin, hives. You know, you really don't want histidine or histamine. But it was really surprising to find that it's really good in arthritis cases because low levels of histamine have been found in rheumatoid arthritis and in the arthritic synovial fluid, which is around the joints. It's also been shown to have an anti-inflammatory effect, which is great for arthritis people. And it regulates the growth and repair of tissue. So if you're low in that, you'll get slow regeneration of tissue, which you don't want if you've got arthritis. You want it to be regenerating at a good rate. So deficiency can lead to slow development, slow learning in children, because it's that histamine is related to, oh, I'll come on to that, don't we? So it converts to histamine, and this regulates our immune defense. And we do need histamine so that we can attack foreign invaders and things and stop bad substances coming into our body. So the amino acids often act as a sort of counterbalance to one another, and methionine counteracts the formation of histamine from histidine. So this is something, I must have always been low in methionine, because this was my deficiency now. But I remember as a late teenager, I used to get hay fever. I remember going into a flower shop and having to walk out again because my eyes were watering so much and my nose was running, it was unbearable. So if I was low in methionine at that time, I didn't have enough methionine to counteract the conversion of histidine to histamine. So histamine is a neurotransmitter, and this has the effect of arousal. And in this respect, it can improve sexual functioning. And it also helps in the digestive system. We know the neurotransmitters that histamine is the stomach, not neurotransmitters, the meridians. Histamine is the stomach meridian for low histamine on the stomach meridian. So that's involved with digestion. And it's also helpful in blood pressure due to its vasodilatory properties. So really, if you've got a person who has arthritis, who has possibly high blood pressure, who has digestion problems and could do with a bit of help in the sexual department, then I think histidine is the one for him. Notice I said him, not her. So the next group of amino acids is the aromatic amino acids. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, maybe it's because they smell nice. But when I looked it up, the aromatic refers to the structure, and they call this ring here the aromatic ring. But I was really partially right, because before they discovered the structure of these substances, they said that they had a sweet, pleasant smell. So I wasn't so wrong after all. But really it's the structure which is the main issue. And this aromatic ring is similar in structure and function to amphetamines. So these amino acids are our natural stimulants. So these are phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan. So phenylalanine is a great pain reliever. It's a constituent of substances in the brain that affect pain, mood, memory, learning, and appetite. You can see the sort of stimulatory nature of it. And it does this by blocking certain enzymes which break down endorphins and enkephalins, which are the pain-relieving substances. So it stops the breakdown of these pain-relieving substances. So from studies, we've shown that phenylalanine is good in the following conditions, in the pain associated with osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, low back pain, joint pains, menstrual cramps, and migraines. So it really has got a useful function. And it's also been shown in studies to curb cravings. Now, it probably does this because it stops the breakdown of those endorphins. And endorphins make you feel euphoric. So if you've got lots of endorphins, you probably won't need, the chocolate or the cocaine or the alcohol. So that's probably the function of how it curbs cravings. But unfortunately, it's decreased by drinking coffee or caffeine. So if you have too much caffeine, all your aches and pains will come back. So it's a precursor of tyrosine, which produces dopamine, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. And that's all the alertness substances in the body. And it's useful for depression because it raises noradrenaline. It's also converted to phenylethylamine, which triggers endorphins, and that substance is also in chocolate. So this goes on to produce tyrosine. Now, the main thing about tyrosine is it goes on to produce hormones. It goes on to produce the thyroid hormones. It also goes on to produce neurotransmitters, dopamine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline, and also the precursor of melanin, which is the substance that gives you the colour of the hair, the eyes, and the skin. And also this has been shown to reduce symptoms of cravings. probably because it goes on to produce dopamine, and dopamine gives you that real sort of high, that reward feeling. So maybe that's how you don't really want to go back to the chocolate and the alcohol and the drugs. And this research was done at the University of Texas, and they did find that good results with tyrosine. And that's, as I was saying, the reward feeling with dopamine. So tryptophan, now for me this is the feel-good factor. It converts into two substances in the body which make you feel really good. It converts to serotonin. Now we know low serotonin leads to depression, it leads to the blues. So it restores, adequate levels of tryptophan will restore your emotional balance, your equilibrium. And it also converts to melatonin, which promotes sleep. Melatonin is for controlling the sleep and waking cycle. So if you had a good night's sleep, you're going to feel great as well. So serotonin and melatonin are from tryptophan to make you feel good. So that's the last, here we go. Serotonin helps to stop that craving for carbohydrates. And it has more of a calming effect than a stimulatory effect, although it's in this same group of amphetamine type substances. It's more of a calming than stimulatory effect. But it just makes you feel good and calm. So there we go. I've done a summary of them all so that you can have a quick glance at what the amino acid that you come up with for your patient will do for them. So that's just a summary that you've got, or maybe haven't got. I will get that sent out, or we'll get that distributed somehow. So there we are. That's amino acids.